welcome to another video from the Norfolk Herald. It's a glorious October morning, a little bit on the cool side, but not cool, so cool that we can't have the top down, and we're off on an adventure. You might just be able to see on the right hand side here the extensive growths of ivy with their flowers that are now in full bloom. These get absolutely covered with bees. There's a species of bee that's only recently appeared in the UK, known as ivy bees, surprisingly, and they're a solitary bee in terms of they dig a hole in the ground and lay an egg in the ground in the hole, and then fill it up with pollen, which will be food for the emerging larva when it comes out next year. And they like fairly clear ground, and you can find thousands and thousands of these locally in specific spots. Quite a sight. So yeah, that's all fairly splendid. Unfortunately, it does bring on my hay fever a bit, so if I sneeze or get stuffed up, I do apologise. Better just wait here for this HGV because the road's pretty narrow. Hopefully he'll get past all right. Anyway, all of that talk about nature has really got nothing to do with what we're up to today. We're off in search of arguably the most formidable and ferocious British woman that's ever lived. You may well already know who that is, of course, by the description that I've given to the video. You may have other opinions. As they say, opinions can vary as well as recollections, as I think the late Queen once said, or something of that nature. Anyway, this is sort of almost a two-part video. We're off today to the village of Quiddenham, which is in South Norfolk, fairly close to Snetterton, which you'll probably know as being one of the major motor racing circuits in the UK. Why are we going to Quiddenham? Well, that'll come out in a little while. Quiddenham is got the suffix ham, which a lot of Norfolk villages, and indeed villages throughout England, southern England anyway, do have, and it's a Saxon suffix, ham meaning place of, and Quiddenham is therefore the place of Queda's people, whoever Queda was. I haven't actually managed to find out much about that, and I doubt anybody else has either. Anyway, the reason we're off to Quiddenham is that Quiddenham is reputed to be the place where our heroine, Boudicca, or Boudicca, is buried. I should say at this point, as a word of caution, there are also several other locations which claim to be the burial place of Boudicca, so we'll just leave that sitting on the table, but it's an excuse to get out and have a lovely journey on this bright morning. This will also tie in with village signs, because you'll be quite interested to see what the village sign of Quiddenham comprises. So that'll be the first video on this subject. Boudicca, or Boudicca, also has links to the town of Thetford. I did think about doing this in one go, but then I thought, no, we'll go to Quiddenham on one and do a video for that, and then we can do Thetford on another occasion. We can look at the links to Boudicca, but we can also have a little bit of a look at Thetford itself. which is very much an underrated town in my opinion. Has a fantastic history to it. So that will hopefully come out within the next 2 or 3 weeks. Anyway, I'm going to make a confession now. There was quite a lot to remember about Boudicca, so I've pre-recorded that, which I'll now dub over the top of the rest of this journey until we get closer to Quidnham, and therefore I'm going to shut up for a while, which you'll all be grateful for, I've no doubt. Well, at least I'm not going to shut up, because you'll still hear my voice, but it might actually make more sense than it normally does.
So Boudicca was queen of the Iceni. I suppose first question, who are the Iceni? So the Iceni were a tribe in eastern England during the Iron Age and the Roman era. They were a very significant force when the Romans conquered Britain in AD 43. The map here shows the extent of their territory, which corresponds to all of modern-day Norfolk, the top approximately 1/2 of Suffolk, and small slices of Cambridgeshire and Lincolnshire adjoining to the west. Now Boudicca, or Boudicca's, and we'll come on to that later, her husband was Prasutagus. He was effectively king of the Iceni, and it's possible he may have been one of the 11 kings who surrendered to Claudius when the Romans conquered Britain in 43 AD, or it's possible he was installed as king following the defeat of an Iceni rebellion in AD 47. It's not known. Anyway, things proceeded relatively peaceably after that until Prasutagus unfortunately died. This is around AD 60. He anticipated there might be a problem, and he attempted to leave half of his kingdom to the Roman Empire and half to Boudicca. But the Romans weren't having any of that at all. They decided that they wanted the lot, so they publicly flogged Boudicca and they raped her 2 daughters. You might imagine she wasn't very keen on that, and so this led to the revolt of the Iceni under the leadership of Boudicca in around AD 60 or AD 61. So was she Boudicca or Boudicca? Most of my life I've known her as Boudicca, and that's the name that we were taught at school. The reason for that is that I went to a grammar school, and Boudicca is the name as described in the Latin chronicles. Well, it was a grammar school, we did Latin, so I think that probably follows on. Not that I've got any pretensions myself, as you might imagine from listening to my voice, which, as they say, that do have a little bit of Norfolk in it from time to time. Anyway, Boudicca, on the other hand, is what she's known as nowadays, and this comes from the Celtic. And the Celtic translates as Boudi, that's victory, and Car, having. So Boudicca, having victory, or victory having. I'll try and refer to her as Boudicca from now on. So as a result of the way she was treated, Boudicca led the Iceni against the Romans, and they went out of territory. The first place they attacked was Camalodunum, which is modern-day Colchester, and they completely sacked that. Next they moved on to Londinium, which I'm sure doesn't need any translation from me, and laid waste to Londinium. And then they moved on to Verulamium, which is modern-day St Albans, and they did the same there. So it was said by Tacitus that around 80,000 people were killed by the rebels altogether. If you do a bit of research, there are some pretty horrific descriptions of how the battle progressed and how individual people were treated, but I won't go into those here. Anyway, the Romans regrouped, And somewhere where it's unfortunately hasn't been recorded in history, so we don't know where, Boudicca and the Iceni were finally defeated. Her army was crushed. Tacitus, a historian, states that Boudicca poisoned herself, but another historian said that she fell sick and died. It's not known which of those is true. But of course we're on the way to a place that purports to have been her burial place. However, it's only one of very numerous number of individual places that do say that that's where she's buried, so we're taking that with a pinch of salt. So what was Boudicca actually like? Well, there's no contemporary description of her in existence. Dio, the historian, provided a detailed description, but he was writing more than a century after her death. Anyway, he said, "In stature she was very tall, in appearance most terrifying, in the glance of her eye most fierce, and her voice was harsh. A great mass of the tawniest hair fell to her hips. Around her neck was a large golden necklace, and she wore a tunic of divers colours, over which a thick mantle was fastened with a brooch. This was her invariable attire." This painting of her by British artist John Opie was made in 1793, so certainly wasn't done from life. However, I think it perhaps does depict a woman of very great force. So I reckon I've made out a pretty decent case for Boudicca being the most formidable and ferocious British woman that ever lived. If you disagree, you'll no doubt tell me. So here we are now about to arrive in Quidnam. You'll see it's a fairly busy road, and the sun is in virtually the worst position it could be for giving you a decent look at the village sign, which depicts Boudicca in all her fury and glory with her chariot. But I'll do my best. So we'll just park up and cross the road as the village sign and Boudicca are on the opposite side of the road where the brick and flint wall is. And here she is, certainly a woman of spirit, formidable and ferocious, I think you'll agree. Purportedly she's buried in land opposite, but there's no public access to that, and I can't even show you a decent photograph as it's completely covered with trees. So this will give you just a general overview of the location where we parked the Triumph and the land opposite the wall there, and where that little gap in the wall is where the sign is. Historic buildings on our left here, and there is a heritage map as well which shows quite a bit of detail. I should have actually stayed on that longer, but you can pause it if you wish. Well, I hope you've enjoyed this little trip out. There will, as I say, be a part 2 to this, possibly within the next couple of weeks. I'm hoping to travel on this coming Sunday, which is in a couple of days' time, out to a working event which should be very interesting. So if you're into large Caterpillar tractors or old steel-wheeled machinery of a very vintage character, then why not like and subscribe, and then you won't miss it. Till next time, bye.